Bajashig, welcome to Indigital Insights. Monique Minach and Dishnakos, Kittikanik, Anishinaabek, and Dojaba. My name is Monique Minach, and I'm a member of the Algonquins of Barrier Lake. And our conversation today is with Clayton Windatt. Now, Clayton, you're living in Sturgeon Falls, Ontario, and you're the executive director of the Artist Run Center conference that's coming up next week.
That's correct.
What are the dates? June?
I think it's June 11th to 14th, and it is in Ottawa. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, we're really happy you're here today. Thank you.
So my name is Clayton Windatt. I am here in Sturgeon Falls, which is Nipissing First Nations territory. I am a mixed settler, Métis, non-status person who makes art and does arts administration. I mean, that's like some big things that I just said, and they cover a lot of ground. I'm really happy to have worked with groups like the Whitewater Gallery before and the Indigenous Curatorial Collective, and to be currently working for the Artist Run Centers and Collectives Conference. And doing a big conference in Ottawa, which, Monique, you're going to be there, which we're really happy to have you.
Damn, I can't wait. This is going to be terrific.
So, I mean, I guess there's so many things I could talk about. I could talk about art. I could talk about events. I could talk about advocacy. I could talk about anything really, because I live and breathe in the art world. So maybe ask away, and I'll try my best to answer.
How did it all begin for you?
Oh, wow. How did it all begin? I was born to Sarah Windatt, who was originally Sarah Dowie, and Russell Windatt in St. Catharines, Ontario. I grew up in a little farming community called Wainfleet, Ontario, which is in the Wellandport area, and then moved up to Nipissing here, around grade 5. So very, very, young, kind of setting down roots up here. My father was in construction. So, and then eventually had a back injury, which, going on disability, he decided he'd rather be somewhere where the fishing was good. And I thought I think that was a good call, because I grew up doing a lot of fishing and a lot of things that people, during the 80s and 90s typically did, which was a lot less cell phones and a lot more talking in person. I always liked to draw when I was younger. I'd like to write stories and imagine things, and grew up on Jocko Point, went to high school in Sturgeon Falls, and then eventually North Bay. Went to school for graphic design at Canadore College. Didn't really find a lot of design work, because that industry's always been hard to make a good living at. I find that designers are always paid less than they probably should be. Went back to school for fine art at Nipissing University, thinking that I would become a teacher, and then graduating before I went to Teachers College, realized that, again, market's very saturated, lots of teachers. And then I landed so, as I was leaving the school, graduating, one of the teachers had said that the Whitewater Gallery was having this emergency meeting because they were going to close. And this was the beginning of 2008. And so I went to the meeting, and I listened to everyone talk about all the things that were kind of going wrong with the organization. And essentially, and there was so many people. There were like 50 people in the room, and they were all kind of, it was very doom and gloom. And I waited for a long time because I didn't really understand what was happening. And eventually I spoke up, and I said, there's so many people here. Like, we should be able to turn this around. Like, it's just this little space. Like, there's like 50 people talking about how much they care about this place. Like, I'm really surprised that it's going to close. And the long story short was that everyone involved kind of just put the keys on the table, and we formed a new board, which I think it was a few months before it was actually the new board, even though we had access to the space that whole time. And I worked there for a few years. As a volunteer, just kind of trying to get things up and running. And eventually, when we had enough money for a job, I said that, they're welcome to hire anyone they want, but if they hire someone else, I am not going to stay and keep working for free. and applied for the job and got it. And then I was there until 2015 when I left for so many reasons, but mostly because I find that contemporary art has like a bit of an obsession on newness, and you have like a lifespan within one of these organizations where you're only relevant for so much time before it looks like you're holding space just for the sake of holding it. And that's a strange thing, but it does happen in contemporary art where you either are changing and growing, or people start looking at you as withering and dying for some reason. But so I gave notice and left, and was independent for a little while before working at the Indigenous Curatorial Collective. And I will say that one of the reasons also is that, no matter how much you love organizations, like artist run centers, they're even the most successful ones, that is not the best paying job for the work that is done, right? Like and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, that it's like these places could use more support in general. And I have that lived experience to speak to that. During that whole time of the gallery, raising a family of 4 and like kids in the gallery, and not making any money, so my kids were all growing up really poor, which is normal, I guess, for some people. but then anyway, so then I was, during some of this time of the Whitewater, I was on the Indigenous Curatorial Collective's board of directors, and that started because I had helped with the newsletter, and someone, a friend of a friend, Jason Berg, had got connected, and he was running the Curatorial Collective, I believe, as the chair at the time. And I started helping with the newsletter, and we would just co-do it together. And then there was a spot on the board, so I got asked if I wanted to join, and I jumped on there. And then we had a staff person working in Toronto, and there was a lot of things that were kind of going on, a lot of moving parts. And 2015 was a very, we'll say, loud year for Indigenous arts, like a lot happening, and a lot of pressures being put on a lot of people. And everyone looks at it from like a financial lens alone, of like this idea that because they're started to have resources put towards things, that was like everything was fine. But the people that were in existing positions, either volunteering their time or not, or getting paid, but like that year was such, it was so hard on people that I really feel bad for things. And we were for the staff that were involved in those transitions. So I was at an annual general meeting, and the staff person had like resigned the day before just because of some of those pressures, and I felt really bad. And then the board knew that I knew how to write grants. So, and they had deadlines like that week. So it was like a week's notice to like pick up a whole bunch of work and start doing it. So I got asked to do a short-term contract to just do grants for the Indigenous Curatorial Collective. And I said, that'd be fine. Like, I wasn't working. I was applying for grants for my own art and trying to be an artist after leaving the Whitewater. And then time passed, and I wrote more and more, and and then at one point I noticed publicly that they were referencing me as the interim executive director, which I was like, I never agreed to that. But you're holding space, so it happens. And then down the path further, what was supposed to be like 2 months had turned into like 8. And I had said, like, are you going to hire someone? Like, you should be posting this job. Like I can't keep working in this capacity, like, and then, so eventually they posted it, and I actually debated not applying, because it is a lot of work, like national level advocacy work. You don't realize what toll it takes on people. Like, you're holding space all the time. There are very few discussions you get to have, even in social settings, that are not in relation to these larger issues. So you feel like you really lose a personal life almost entirely by doing that work. And then I applied, and what's no, there were very few applicants, so I actually forced them to repost the job because I felt like if it wasn't a healthy competition, it shouldn't be done at all. And then I applied to the second one, and then I almost didn't get hired because good people really applied, and it was a real battle. And then the board actually came to me and the one other candidate and asked if we would be interested in co-directing, and I think we both had said yes. And then that person got another job offer at like during the process and went on and became the executive director of Imaginative. And who would have said no to that job? That was like very much more attractive than the advocacy work that had to be done. So then I was left alone, which kind of bummed me out actually, because I was really looking forward to co-directing. So I was there for about 4 years total, and they were that whole early stage 2015 to 2018 of like TRC information getting rolled out, having every random arts organization that had never worked with Indigenous people like just cold calling you and soliciting like, you know, plans that they had already made, that they're just trying to engage with and access Indigenous money, which, you know, anyone that has anyone that's grown up knowing that they're a non-status person knows to ask about the qualifications for accessing resources, right? So like a lot of things have shifted in the arts over the last few years in relation to self-identification or holding status within a community. But when there were things that have been in place for a long time, like education bursaries or working with, you know, different First Nation specific communities, they would be very clear, like, we're not saying you are or are not something. We're saying that this money is not for you. And that's how clear it'd be, right? So when you grow up accessing or not accessing these things, you know to ask whether something is for you or not. And when they say no, it's not like an attack. It's just more like that's not the area you're supposed to be in. Or that's not the money for that. That's for these people because of these treaties that they fall under. Like there's very clear things. And I felt like that time period, the arts sector really struggled with that, which is where, you know, all the terminology around, you know, cultural appropriation and, you know, freedom of expression and pretendians, all that stuff kind of was happening and, you know, blowing up during that time. And it was interesting. I remember even when I was at the Indigenous Curatorial Collective, there was like a fund that showed up at the Ontario Arts Council, and it was because they, for a brief period of time, they had that like $5 million reconciliation fund. And I remember various board members at the Indigenous Curatorial Collective would say like, oh, we should go after that. We're based in Ontario. And I was like, it says very specifically like working in community. And they're like, yeah, well, we could do that. I'm like, you've never done that. Like you're all working in universities, like you're academics, you're working in those other settings. Like you really, like you're doing what people do to us every day when you make this conversation. Like you're trying to access things that are really not made for us. And that was a healthy conversation, but it's like, these are the things about like, holding space in that area of like trying to make sure that organizations are doing the right thing on behalf of the communities that have asked them to do those things, right? And like that idea of really understanding what agency means, and what, like, you know, I remember presenting at the Canada Council with the Indigenous Performing Arts Alliance as well with us, and like naming all the people that worked on the presentation with us, and all the different, you know, reps that held space, because we were the only two Indigenous organizations presenting there. And the reason why we went out of our way to really name everything is to say, because when I speak, I'm only speaking with my voice. I'm not speaking on behalf of all the First Nations communities of Canada, which is what you're trying to get us to constantly do, is, you know, just that kind of bizarre idea that if someone has any claim to a community at all, that they're apparently the aficionado of that community, just instinctually is never made sense to me, but it happens all the time somewhere out in the world. And I won't say what organization or what event, but somewhere out in the world, there's a photo of me like pulling my hand out of somebody else's hand going like, and it's because they attempted to apologize to me at a podium on behalf of all white people for residential school. And I was just like, yanked my hand back so fast, and someone snapped a photo of that happening. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, I'm not accepting an apology for that. Also, like, you want to prepare someone before you put them at a podium that you're going to drop a bomb like that on them? Like, holy moly. Like, you're out of your depth,
Yeah,
you know?
that's crazy.
Well, it used to happen all the
Oh,
time.
yeah. I was, yeah, there was, yeah. And it still happens sometimes where I'm like, what? This kind of, I can't believe you just said that. I mean, it's one thing like to work with the urban community as well as on reserve and with the Métis folks and with the Inuit, but it's still working with a community and working within, not at or with, but from from the community.
And like the idea of who's speaking on behalf of who, like I think about like arts grants and how I'm not sure if it's still there, but I remember there was one where essentially it dealt with intellectual property and indigenous intellectual property and community property. And, if you were going to be exploring something that could touch on that, how were you addressing the authorship or I'll
Mhm.
access the idea of working with community? And I was like, and my projects rarely engage in any kind of cultural identity. It's usually like larger contemporary perspectives that may or may not have many peoples involved. So it's really like I don't feel like that's going to happen, but I'll go out of my way when I respond to that question to say, if something were to touch on one of these subjects, I would go and work with the like official representatives of the community to make sure that we're operating in a healthy way, which includes stopping if they say no, right? Like, because that's what real consultation should be, is that if you're doing something that no one wants you to be doing, you have to be prepared to actually stop, not just say, oh, I had a consultation and although they don't like it, we're moving forward, because technically that could also be consultation. I think that the idea of respecting healthy relations is more important than whether or not you're making artwork that I don't know. I don't know. I don't have I can't really understand what I would say to justify that, but you get the
Yes,
idea.
it's I often say when I do talks or whatever, um, I'll say I can only speak on from my own experiences and what I've learned, and I'm hoping that there will be people who are like-minded and who feel the same way I do. However, yeah, I can't. I mean, I grew up in Toronto. Nobody else was Indig in my school, and anything Indig, they all looked at me, and I suddenly became this representative of my people, which w- I didn't even know what they were talking about half the time, And that's something like I work with the education boards, and that's something that we've really pressed home to them, that you don't ask an Indig kid in your class to explain the Indigenous culture because you don't know what they are. You don't know, how much they've learned. You don't know. They might not know. And then that just creates shame.
Well, and even if they do know, are you going to pay them? Because if they're a subject matter expert that's holding space and doing the job of the teacher, then maybe they should be compensated for that knowledge, right? Um, and on terms that are mutually beneficial, like you said, as opposed to expecting someone to hold knowledge that they don't. I mean, there's been times where uh, I have been asked to like help the oversight for like a selections committee for a public art piece, and then so working with like a government to make sure that there's a bunch of RFPs sent out, and maybe it'll be a bunch of different communities, maybe it'll be one, maybe it'll be Indigenous specific, maybe it'll be BIPOC, but like there's been a lot of different priorities that they've put out. But then in the end, I would see someone say, well, Clayton's the Indigenous consultant on this project, and I'm like, no, I'm not. And they're like, well, well, that's you though. And I'm like, you came up with that. I didn't. Do you know that people get PhDs in Indigenous studies, right? Like I have no formal I'm a graphic designer and artist. Like when you put that label on me, people are going to expect that I teach or that I hold a lot of knowledge on that subject, and I don't. I just know how to navigate this and how to go and call someone who does. So like I'm fine being called a knowledge broker as someone who can see what you're asking for and go find the people to do it for you. But I'm
Mhm.
not the people.
No, you're a facilitator. You facilitate the
That's right.
liaison.
That's right. And just keep it as simple as it has to be. Like you don't know how to ask the right questions. You don't know how to treat someone the way they wanted to be treated so that this process could even begin. So you needed someone to step in and do that. And you know, and hopefully a long term that won't be the case. But you know, I still run into governments every day that have very poor relations with Indigenous communities, and
They don't know the protocols. They've never learned them.
that's
They've never
right.
learned.
And sadly,
Yeah.
it's usually the leadership that are
Oh,
at
yeah.
that place, which I find that to be the most frustrating because that's the ones that need to do the most amount of work so that they can be an example for the rest of their company.
Exactly.
Or
They set the tone. They create the environment. Whether or not the other people working there will you know be mindful of the
yeah,
protocols and be mindful of who's in the community and who they can reach out to and how they should reach out to them
one hundred
when
percent. So
yeah.
working at the Indigenous Curatorial Collective took a lot out of me. In the fall of 2017, I realized that my kids had gotten taller while I was traveling to do work for them, and that from like a multi-month period that I had only been home a handful of days, just going to all these different meetings and all these different conferences, and you know, really things weren't being done on Zoom the way they are now, or on online services in the same way. So a lot of things were expected to be there in person, and I was just getting burnt out. So I gave notice, and the person who replaced me, Camille Georgeson Usher, they were kind of awesome, and I had really been worried about leaving because there's so many times that when organizations leave that there's like a lot, you know, these organizations are they struggle, and there's that transition where it's like everything that goes wrong is going to get blamed on you, or you're fearing that, or you're worried that, you know, they're going to put a new management sign on the, you know, flip the sign being like, oh, finally things are going to get done well. And I actually felt that the you know, as the outgoing ED, they treated me very kindly, and they did a lot of work to try to just make me feel included, and I did a lot of work to try to not hold space and be included, and you know, be. So it was this beautiful, respectful exit, which I'm very happy about, and since then I've haven't really worked with the Indigenous Curatorial Collective until next week, which we, you know, we'll get to that, but I had left to do my own thing and work, and I did some consulting gigs, and I did some arts projects, and I did some festivals, and then eventually COVID happened, and I was going back to school already before I found out that I was going to be going to school only online. Um, and I did a master's degree in design for health because I thought about going and getting a degree in something to do with art, but then I really thought about how, like, I've been an active artist for, you know, more than 20 years at this point, and I don't really know what going into a studio practice would really teach me, right? And other than allowing me to teach studio practices for others, which I thought about what could I do for the art sector in other ways. So I thought about design and connecting my graphic design past to kind of my arts world and what the arts world could learn maybe from the health sector. So going into a design for health program where you're the people in your cohort are like, you know, pharmacists and dentists and doctors and nurses, and then some other designers, but, you know, a lot of people from the medical sector, and you're kind of like, well, this is pretty wild. You know, doing systems design for complex care facilities, or, you know, researching like health data and how to make it work and problem solving things. But then, while the pandemic was happening and you're like locked in your house, so obviously the pandemic also held a lot of space as far as like the work that was being discussed, although it wasn't a focus for me personally. And then, as soon as the first day of school, essentially, and ARCA called saying, do you want to be interviewed for this job that you applied for? And I did the interview and got it. So all of a sudden I was working at ARCA during the pandemic and holding space. And for the first little time period, the ED that was outgoing and I worked at the same time. So she had some contracts to wrap up, and we kept her on for certain duties. And I say we kept her on, she kept herself on. I mean, it wasn't like a one-sided thing, it was negotiated, but I thought about it in the same way of me leaving the Indigenous Curatorial Collective, that I was really honored to be able to have the person who had held the space and did the work explain things and answer my calls like up to a year later kind of thing, and still say, well, this is that, and this is how that worked. And I did my best to try to treat them the way I would want to be treated as well. So it went well in that way. And now today I have a master's degree in design, which is cool. I have taught a couple classes at OCAD, one in multi-sensory museum, which is the idea of like looking at objects from multiple perspectives as opposed to only from like a visual way. So the idea of like how to allow someone to experience artwork in a multi-sensory capacity. And then I also have taught the interdisciplinary art and design studio cohorts for their masters and for their first semester. So a couple classes that I picked up that are cool, and they don't happen all the time, but when they do, I have a lot of fun. And yeah, so that's all the things outside of my arts practice itself, I think, that catches us up. But that whole time, making films, making art, visual art installations, sometimes performance art, sometimes theater, sometimes writing, sometimes professional wrestling. I've become a professional wrestler now as well. It's wild.
What's your name?
My wrestling name is Rusty Blackwell, the Backwoods Butcher. So, I wear a leather butcher's apron, and I have a tag team partner named Tommy McLeod, the Two Gun Kid, and he's literally half my size and climbs on my shoulders and jumps off of me and does all this stuff. And I had started out, I was going to be like this tough guy, like Bill Chainsaw, and I'll be mean, and nobody was buying it. No one would believe that I was a mean person. I guess I just don't. But then I kept going through all these names, trying to figure out like what it was that my wrestling name would be. And Dan Pagozzo runs the Energy Y Wrestling Academy, and I was asking him for advice, and he said, just send me a big list. So I sent this giant list of names, and in there, he said he saw the name Rusty a whole bunch of times. And he's like, why do you keep coming to this name Rusty? And I was like, well, my father's name was Russell and his nickname was Rusty. So like my friends and family, like the people that know me would get that immediately, because when my father's been passed away for some time, that it's like me kind of, showing respect to my father. And he was a big wrestling fan. So then he said, well, why don't you do something like Rusty Blackwell, because you wrestle like Jerry Blackwell, the mountain from Stone Mountain, or something else like the Backwoods Butcher, because you live in Sturgeon Falls and you wrestle like Butcher Vachon and Mad Dog Vachon, right? Because I'm always wrestling like these 1970s wrestlers. I don't flip around and do stuff. I'm just big and heavy. And I saw it in the message. Why don't Rusty Blackwell, Backwoods Butcher? And when I came to see him next, he goes, well, did you see that message I sent you? And I'm like, I already own the website. Like, it's done.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
Love it.
So the name has a lot of meaning to me in that way. Yeah.
How long have you been doing that?
That was only started training and wrestling actively when the pandemic let us out. So
Mhm.
it came about because I'd always talked about it. And I tried to organize, like me and some theater people in the area, like going to a school and spending a weekend learning how to do some things. Cause I always found it interesting because I'm one of those people that wants to almost learn how to do everything in the entire art world. And just the knowing of how it works and being part of it to a degree is more interesting than being the best at it. Like I don't need to be the best at something. I just like to be able to be involved at all. And I had thought I tried multiple times over the years to try to come up with how to do a wrestling camp or go and do an intensive, and it's not easy. And then this school opened in the area, so a friend who was participating and said like, "Hey, I thought of you when this came up. Do you want to do this?" And we put together a little group and went in together. And at first I said. I just wanted to be like a wrestling manager. Like, I don't think I could actually wrestle because I have a lot of physical health issues. Like, I broke my neck playing football in high school. I have like really bad hips and bad knees. And when the pandemic was first letting out, I was over 400 pounds because I'd been sitting around doing nothing for years at that point, and eating, whatever garbage food I could get because you're coping with the realities of life. And so the trainer Dan had said, like that's not how it works. Like, if you want to be part of this, you got to go through the whole thing and try your best. And I did, and all of a sudden I was in the ring, and so that was about 4 years ago now, and I'm like 100 pounds plus lighter than I was then. So, which I don't think you can be active and keep that kind of weight on, but it's been an interesting journey. Yeah, and the wrestling has taken me all over Canada and into the United States as well. So it's been pretty fascinating.
So what kind of tournaments do they have? How does that work?
Well, it's so that's the interesting part is that it's there are tournaments there, but it's more like pro wrestling, like TV wrestling. So it's more like you're coming out and you're like rah and doing all that stuff and jumping and like poof. It's not like you show up and you get weighed in and
Yeah.
you fill out forms. It's more the spectacle. So and a few examples are that actually Northland Wrestling, which the trainer that I trained with is running a show later this month in North Bay, which is their big promotion, and it has some people that were on TV that'll be on that show. I think it's on June 21st, which is National Indigenous Day, and I think they'll probably have like 500 or 600 people at that event wrestling or watching the wrestling. And show that I just went to in Surrey, BC, which All Star Wrestling brought me out and a couple friends to wrestle at the Cloverdale Rodeo, which was a lot of fun. And we were on 5 shows in 3 days, and I got to come out a couple days early and go visit friends in Victoria Island. And so it takes me places, and it's always like bluntly, it's the audience is the best. Meeting people that are good people and supportive, like that's super amazing. Like it's hard to complain when you have that, right? Where people are cheering for you, and then you get paid to do it. Like
It sounds like a blast.
it is a blast. I'm very privileged. The wrestling is a huge, huge joy. I mean, it's like no matter what, like wrestling doesn't pay as well as it should. But then live events don't pay as well as they should either, right? And that's I think a bigger issue is that like if you've got 100 people paying $25 a piece to go into an arena and watch a wrestling show, that means there's $2,500 that got put on the table. But then you have the hall rental, you have the gas, the trucks, the hotels, the meals, the insurance, all those things. And by the time you get to the 15 or 20 performers, all of a sudden you're not really getting paid as if I worked a minimum wage job that day. but that's not why we do it, right? And I feel bad saying that, but it's true. Like you do it because you love it and you get something else out of it. And it's definitely why I did like over 100 shows last year. And this year I will not be doing that many.
It would
I
take a physical toll. Like that could hurt you.
Well, and I just can't afford to go on the road that much. Financially, I have to pay some bills and I have to work more. And I was doing things where I would come up with excuses why ARCA would benefit from it. So I would have like, I would go to a town, do a work meeting for ARCA in that town, and then go wrestle that evening in that town. And that made sense, but it doesn't make it's too much. It's too much on me. I need to focus more on one or the other. And when I'm wrestling, I want to be able to turn off my phone and just enjoy the scenery and meet people and have fun and do some heavy lifting when it comes to the work itself, but then not feel distracted with everything else. This year has been much less than last year, and it's felt a lot better as a result too.
I think so. Because it's when you're out, I'd imagine when you're traveling on the road and you're having to be out there every night, 100, like that's like there's only 300 and change days in the year.
That's right. Well,
And
and
it's like it's
well, there's some times where I want to say sometime last year I had the opportunity to. So there is a shout out to Canadian Wrestling Elite for taking me on tours and for being awesome and continuing to support me. And I was partnered with Savio Vega, the WWE legend who defeated Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 14, and he was my tag team partner for 21 days. And there were a few days before and after that I was wrestling for other companies, but in the end, it made it that there was a month last year that I essentially was not home. I just got in a car and was going town to town, and I wrestled every single day that during those days. And it took a huge toll on me. And during the day, I was working for ARCA on a laptop from wherever I could be, or having meetings for ARCA. And then in the evening, I was wrestling. So it was sort of like working two full-time jobs, but not having weekends off. And it was a lot of fun, but it was very educational. It was very interesting to see how the wrestlers that literally live that way work. And it was informative to think about, like, especially like work ethics and the amount of work that gets done by people having to live realistically off of very little in order to make it work. And then it made me feel privileged enough to know that I'm going to respect that, and when I'm going back to my day job, I'm going to apply some of those work ethics to that.
excellent. And it's not something you can really apply to the Canada Council for either, like OAC or whoever. Like you can't really,
Yeah, maybe
it's
maybe I'll be the one to change their minds.
maybe.
I will say I this I don't want Terrence Houle to hear this and get mad at me, but I don't know if the leg wrestling league that I participated in with Terrence, like more than 10 years ago now, had a Canada Council grant or not. And if it didn't, I will say it should have, because that there was this whole amazing, I want to say, like Indigenous exploitation type work he was doing to kind of deal with a lot of things that were kind of happening at that time period. And and it became like this sensationalized wrestling league that was like following the Boy Scouts native leg wrestling kind of pamphlet, which I think the Boy Scouts had appropriated or misappropriated something. And it was really him turning all these things on his head and pulling all these people together. And when he came to North Bay and I was working at the Whitewater Gallery, he set up a ring, and Sid Bob, who works at On Matagze Storymakers, and I became like the opening act for his wrestling federation. And Sid Bob became this glamorous Indian taco who had a giant feather boa and was all painted up and very, kind of intense and stoic and mean. And I had a green luchador mask with my hair coming out in pigtails. And I was the green Métis who was angry at all of those status card carrying Indians for having all of the benefits. And then we had our match, which ended with us at a draw because the real enemy was lateral violence. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Sid
That's
came up with a lot of that, and Terrence was on
fantastic.
board. So, but it was it was it
Yeah.
was it was a lot of fun, and so I mean, to the larger thing, if the Canada Council suddenly wants to have money for wrestling, first I'd hope that maybe they could talk Terrence into revitalizing his performance art esque wrestling initiative, or he can tell them to go to hell and do it himself. Either way, I'd be a big fan. But I mean, if yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of options to get money from the Canada Council for wrestling, but I'd like to
It is
see more.
performance. Certainly is live performance,
It is. I mean, I also think about how there's so many like community initiatives
Hmm.
that are not necessarily fitting into one category. And there's so many of those things that happen that I really wish there was better supports for those things.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. They don't. Even sometimes like in the CKS, there's this, you know, it, the fit is can be challenging. Yeah.
Yes. And the like I think about how people have made powwow work without having
True.
any
True.
of those kind of larger federal government involvements. And then I think about how much those governments should be paying for that to happen. But then, I don't know how eager everyone is going to be to change the way it's working, because it's working because people have put in the time to make it work. And
Well,
to show up with money, they might take it, but I don't know why they would want to change anything. Uh,
yeah, it usually comes with strings. And I remember there used to be. I don't think Toronto has a powwow anymore. They used to.
I'm aware that Toronto has talked about trying to create powwow grounds with new facilities development and new arenas and things like that multiple times. But I'm also, again, there's a part of me that goes, just because they have the physical space, I don't know how much any community would be eager to activate and do that work there, because
Because well, the city of Toronto used to put money in for the
yeah,
powwow. And then I'm not sure what happened. God knows there's a million stories out there, but then they stopped. And then after that, they didn't have the support of the city, so they didn't have the space, and they didn't, and then it stopped, which was too bad because I mean, it's the capital of Ontario. I mean, it's our biggest city in Canada, and it doesn't have a powwow. It's
well, and I find that this, whether it's Toronto or whether it's the province of Ontario or whether it's the federal government, like I find that large bureaucracies tend to have these kind of struggles where someone can be really motivated to try to make things right, and then they do not necessarily have the authority to do it, or they shift their position and all of a sudden they're replaced by somebody who has no idea what the hell anybody's talking about. And you pass that along through generations, and the trust is kind of eroded, right? And I remember uh Jesse Wente had asked me to, if I was available to do a short animation for the new Cinesphere that opened at Ontario Place. And they specifically wanted it to have something to do with KI and North is Superior, like the region. And I said, well, I'm not from that territory. I don't really have any connection to those communities, so I don't really think I'm the right person to do this film. And he said, well, we've tried to reach out to multiple artists from the area, but no one feels confident as filmmakers. And I was like, well, you should reach out to them again. And then they came back saying, no, they don't feel comfortable doing it. Like, they don't feel confident as filmmakers. And I'm like, well, I why don't they direct it, and we'll co-direct, and I'll make sure it can get made. And that, because my issue is that I don't know what I don't feel like I should have an opinion on their life, because I've literally never been there. So, like, how like alienating it is to have some random white passing dude from Sturgeon Falls like show up, and what, this is the way life is up here. Like, that's very not who I am, I
that's
hope.
yeah. That's where they should be digging deeper and saying, why don't you feel confident enough, and what would it take? You
So
know, how do we make this work? Because
I got paired with Daryl Sainwiwap, who was awesome and really great photographer, and he basically kind of walked me through some of the struggles that the community had and some of the opinions, and then I would ask a lot of questions, and it became almost like a consulting, like, but in the end I'm trying to get him to answer his own questions by coming up with things. And he came up with sort of the idea of the petroglyphs that were on the north shore of Superior, um, having it that almost like one of the maps that would have been used by the explorers from from the turn of the century, like the missionaries, having like the petroglyphs being like spray painted over top of the map. And then we had to do that in like a 4K IMAX, which was crazy. I think it's only like a minute and a half long animation, but it's like it was such a huge file because everything's 4,000 by 4,000 pixels, right? And so we did that, and then it's funny, then we had problems with TIFF because TIFF didn't want to pay both of us, so I just said we'll just pay him, and they're like, well, yeah, but you're going to come to the opening. And I started realizing some of this was like trying to add Indigenous Curatorial Collective cachet to their project, which I don't think Jesse was really aware of that, because he was sort of on his way out of the organization at the time, but it was fine. I made sure everybody got paid properly, and I kind of pushed pretty hard and got them to fly Daryl and his wife down as well to the opening. So then our little film was opened the Cinesphere, and the Cinesphere was such a cool little building. But then I got to see the rest of the grounds for Ontario Place, which were basically like a bunch of buildings falling into the ground. Like, and I was like, what's going on? Like, why is it like this? Like, oh, no one can figure out what to do with this place. And I'm like, the province of Ontario can't figure out what to do with the most, what I would consider the most expensive real estate in North America. Like the most high priced real estate
Mhm.
in all of Canada and the United States, and you don't know what to do with it. How about anything? How about do anything at all would be better than having these buildings just turned
Yeah,
into like fault, like safety hazards, which is
yeah,
bizarre. But that's the same thing. Like the idea of like no matter where you look, I find when government's involved, there's something going wrong, and it's usually just because they get so detached from the people that are directly affected by it, you know, and like that the decision making needs to be done by the people that are affected by it the most. That's my
absolutely.
opinion. But
I mean, I was a teenager. I remember working at Ontario Place, and back then it was trashy. You know, and we're
yeah,
talking 40 or more years ago.
well, did it have a
And
water park at one point?
I think it did. Yeah, there was it was like a rail thing you went through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did. It did at one point. I remember mostly it was just there was a bunch of really crappy restaurants. It's terrible. A pub, and I worked at a place called Dora's, I think. They had water boats, you know, you could paddle boats. You could do that. And they had the amphitheater.
hmm
So stuff there. That was kind of interesting. The entertainment was kind of interesting, but there wasn't much else, you know. And then I remember, yeah, they had this kind of roller coaster type, sort of a water thing. It had its water moments, you know.
Yeah.
People all got splashed at the end, but that was about it. But yeah, yeah, I haven't been there, and oh my god, it's got to be 30 years at least.
Well, I remember I was in some discussion with somebody at the premier's office about because I had complained a little bit about this is what happens when you complain about things is you get asked to fix it yourself. But I complained about how bad the grounds looked, and then somebody had put me in touch with somebody, and I just reiterated, and then they said, well, what would you do? And I said, well, I mean, you're in Toronto, like this is the hub for the city, like why don't you talk with all the other municipalities about having like information centers about travel in Ontario be here, like have it that it's like you do like an Ontario pavilion that lets you kind of have an idea of like if you were going to drive or fly to Thunder Bay or somewhere else in Canada, like I don't know how many people are coming to Toronto from the rest of the world, but I'm sure if they had an opportunity to go and get a little bit better information in regards to like Thunder Bay or Winnipeg or, Yellowknife, like Whitehorse, like whatever, maybe that would actually make them want to go to those places instead of just saying they've been to Toronto, now they've been to Canada, you know. But and I remember I sent that message and I said something, and you're doing this labor for just because you want things to be better in the world, but really I don't know why I'm trying to help. But then I remember nothing came of it. I didn't hear from anybody for a while, and then a few months passed, and I thought, well, I'll follow up and just send another message. And the person that responded was like saying, "Oh, hi, I'm the person that's replaced the person you were trying to reach." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna stop. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll be in that office, and I don't want that job.
No, I don't have the stress, or what is it, the I w- you know how the stress or immunization, like I don't have that kind of system that would be able to take on that that kind of that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, no, I think that it takes a very determined person to survive working inside those kind of government offices, and
Hmm.
I feel for them because I know I couldn't do it. I really
No,
couldn't. Yeah,
it reminds me, what is that from Alice in Wonderland? Jam tomorrow and jam yesterday, but never jam today.
yeah, yeah. It's just a bit. Yeah, I mean, I think that they would entice more people to work there if they just offered jam. Um,
Today,
yeah, today, yeah, I would eat some jam.
I would have some jam. Jam's good. I like jam.
Yeah,
It's funny.
but the arts. I mean, I said this recently to somebody, and I thought about it a lot, and I really feel like that it makes sense to me now. But I was there's an exhibition at the Whitewater Gallery that is the first time I've been involved with them since I left in 2015. So it's been 10 years, and I curated a small exhibition for them because they asked as someone else had dropped out, and I said sure. And then one of the artists, his name is Jacob Solomon, and it's his first time ever exhibiting in an art space. And I said, oh, well, that's it. Now the art world's got a hold of you. And he's like, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, you kind of live in it now. Like it's part of your life. Like it's not a choice. Like you've had an exhibition of your work. The next thing that people will say like a month from now is going to say, so what are you doing now? And all the time people are going to ask you about your arts practice because it's now in this context of creation and sharing that you've opened yourself to, that the rest of your life people are going to be asking you about your contemporary arts and what are you doing and how's that going. And then if you stop, they'll say, oh, you should get back on it, you should do it, because it's like a mode of communication, right? It's a way of communicating and making offerings, um and people that enjoy it, like, or want to support you, they know that hopefully your work is giving you a lot back, right?
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so tell us about the conference coming up. What do we?
So the conference is called Against the Current, which we have a committee in Ottawa who is all organizations based there, and then some external, which include the Indigenous Curatorial Collective because they have representation more kind of across the country. But they pulled together everything. So that's currently ARCA's structure, is to not necessarily dictate programming, but to work with a region on a national conference and to have them sort of state what the agenda should be and what the subject should be. And so there's some reps at SAW and Gallery 101 and a few other organizations that sort of pulled everything together. And I've been at a lot of meetings where I'm pretty much just telling everybody how great they are and being really happy about things. And it's really easy to stand on their shoulders because they're doing really great work. So it's like funny, everyone's going to be, because I'm like the ED of ARCA, people are going to walk up, be like, oh, you're doing such a great job, this is such a great conference. And because I've been doing conferences for a long time, and I'm always like, it's literally not me doing it, but thank you. It's really, you're just, when you're in this position, you're just the person that holds space for everyone else to be able to do their job well. and be the person that, you know, gets asked a question and knows who to go ask to get the answer. And it's sort of like the same as the consulting world, is that it's very easy when you work with wonderful people to have really great things happen. And yeah, so it'll start on the Wednesday first thing in the morning, and there's a little bit of stuff happening the day before on the Tuesday, but in a similar way, it goes all day, and then all kinds of evening programming. There's some great stuff. I want to say, I think Asanabka is having like a Two Spirit Cabaret the one night, and
Oh, that's
there's
great.
some other openings and some great talks. I think Rebecca Belmore is supposed to do a great talk at one point, and then do something maybe over on Parliament, if that's still happening. And then it all wraps up on the end of the day Friday, but then Saturday there's all kinds of external additional programs. There's some openings, there's some gallery exhibitions, there's some stuff. So it's a lot going on. I also want to say how proud I am of all the ARCA staff, because I think we're almost sold out of conference registration. So like we're hitting our capacity, which I would not have predicted. The last, like, since the pandemic, numbers have been down in general for things, and I think that I think we're finally hitting that turning point where people are starting to want to come together more.
Mm-hmm.
The you know, the Indigenous Curatorial Collective is going to be presenting, but so is CARFAC, and so is the Independent Media Arts Alliance, who are all partnering. So there's a lot of other art service organizations that are going to be represented there, which I think has also got a buzz going about, you know, advocacy discussions and wanting to see, you know, some shifts in the arts towards a little bit more sustainability for maybe arts workers, and a little bit more you know, understanding of like various issues. But you know, there's never a dull moment in the art world, so it'll be interesting. And I'll be there the whole time to either get yelled at or have you can come cry on my shoulder, or you know, I'll hand you a tissue, one or the other. But it'll be all good. We'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll yell, we'll scream. It'll be fine. Yeah.
Where can we find out more information?
So let me see. I want to say the website's name, but I want to make sure I have it correct. So it is. So it's against the current, one word. So .art, and also you can go to arca.art website and see it, or you can go to the Indigenous Curatorial Collective's website and see it. There's links to it from multiple places, but if you were to look at against the current and then ARCA, if you Google search that, you'd find the website, which is in both English and French, and has a clock counting down on the opening page. It says there's 6 days and 18 hours left.
That's going to be great.
I think so. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I cannot wait. There's the programming. Speakers. Yeah, I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to this conference.
Oh, thank you. Me too.
I'd love to. Yeah, I can't wait to. And some of the, like, with CARFAC and whatnot, I've been working on some of those committees. The fact that Rebecca Belmore is going to be there, her work is fantastic. And yeah, some of the other people, I think it's going to be amazing, and I can't wait to see it.
I can't wait either, and I can't wait to see all the people involved. And I'm going to, in my head, I was just remembering how I have to reach out to some people and ask ahead of time if they wouldn't mind being like witnesses for a day, to then make some offerings back to kind of make sure that we're not just recording things analytically or technically, and instead having it that maybe people can talk about their feelings and do a little bit of that kind of sharing. So I find that that's more valuable in some ways, the stories that we tell about these things, than necessarily the digital capturing of those things. So yeah,
you're right. We do need to hold space for that. Absolutely. Oh, Dominic's going to be there.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, Dominic Fontaine. Yeah.
I did not know until I saw the rollout of people either, and I want to say I'm a huge fan of Dolafoe's music, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and I have to tell him that I've had like one of his songs from like I want to say like 2010, like in my playlist in my car for the past like 15 years, and I've been listening to it almost
Wow.
every day or every other day for that entire time, and he doesn't even realize it because uh, I have so many questions I have to ask about it, but it was like it was we were going to do this collaborative album at one point, and then the album never manifested. The project didn't happen, so
Oh,
that was the track that he sent to be on this album, and I've just been like I liked it so much I've just been listening to it. Should probably buy a CD to make up for that, I guess, but hopefully he'll let me off without being angry about that. Maybe we'll see.
well, on that note, um, well, thank you so much
Oh,
for talking with us today. Yeah.
thank you. No, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this work. Like this is a there's never it's the work will never be done, but everyone is going to appreciate how much you're doing, and I know that.
Thanks.
I know that because I've seen the work you've been doing for years, and every time you walk in, everybody I feel like they get a bit more hop in their step. So
Thanks. Well, again, it's a group effort. There's a lot of people who are Evan, our producer, and our editors, and Anise is helping with editing, and Tyler Compton, and Mimi out east, and a bunch of others. So yeah, it's
it's
been
amazing.
a really. I've been really fortunate to be working with these people and to be able to. For me, it's just a pleasure and an honor to be able to talk with everybody. I mean, it's fantastic.
That's
So
awesome.
continue, Rich. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon.
All right,
I'm looking.
thank you.
Okay.